Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we have this really interesting piece about relationships and how they connect to the fantasies we have about love.
Yeah, so true.
I mean, like, searching for the one can sometimes feel like searching for, a unicorn or something.
Totally. It's like we're chasing this ideal that might not even exist.
Right. And this reflection kind of takes us along on Alex's journey of figuring all this out.
Okay.
Starting with, this experience they had when they were like 16. I think they were describing this classmate that they had a huge crush on.
Uh-huh.
And you know how it is when you have a crush. You start imagining all these like classic first love moments, like holding hands, sharing secrets, all that fairy tale
Oh,
stuff.
yeah, you build it up so much in your head.
Exactly. And so finally, Alex gets the courage to actually talk to this crush, and like reality kind of hits them in the face.
Oof. Yeah, I've been there. It's like you're projecting a whole movie onto this person, and then you get surprised when they don't follow the script.
That's such a good way to put it. It's like being captivated by the idea of someone rather than the actual person.
Exactly.
Which makes me wonder, like, why are we so drawn to these fantasies in the first place?
Well, I think they give us a sense of hope, you know? They help us picture what we want, even if it's not always realistic.
That's true. I guess it's like having something to aim for.
Exactly. Aspiration is a good thing. The key is recognizing the difference between that and expectation.
That's a really good point. Because in this reflection, it sounds like Alex's idea of finding someone perfect actually ended up making them feel more isolated.
Yeah, that makes sense. I
They,
mean, that whole perfect partner thing can be kind of a trap.
how so?
Well, for one thing, it sets the bar impossibly high, but I think it can also mask a deeper fear of vulnerability and imperfection, like both in ourselves and in potential partners.
That's interesting. Alex actually says at one point, if they found someone perfect, wouldn't they have to be perfect too? It's almost like they were afraid to even try.
Yeah, that's a really common fear. But I think it's important to remember that real love isn't about finding someone who checks every box on some imaginary list.
So what is it about then?
It's about connecting with someone who accepts you, our flaws and alls, and who wants to grow alongside you.
Okay, that makes sense. So moving on from that, I noticed the reflection then talks about this relationship where Alex really focused on outward appearances. Like they were dating someone everyone considered really attractive.
Yeah, I remember that part.
And at first, Alex felt this sense of pride almost.
Yeah.
But that eventually shifted into feeling kind of uneasy.
It really shows you how much those societal beauty standards can mess with your head.
Totally. Like you start valuing your relationship based on how it looks to other people instead of how it actually feels.
Right. And that's when you start to lose sight of what really matters,
Mm.
like genuine connection.
It's like Alex says later on, I wasn't dating them because I loved who they were. I was dating them because I wanted to love what people thought of us. It's like they were looking for validation from the outside instead of from within.
Exactly. And that's never going to lead to true happiness.
So how do you escape that trap then? How do you break free from those societal beauty standards and find something deeper?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Well, luckily, this reflection gives us a possible answer.
Right.
Because after this relationship, Alex meets Sam, and their connection seems to be built on something way more substantial.
Oh, yeah, Sam.
And what I found interesting is that Sam wasn't what Alex had initially pictured. Like, there weren't any grand romantic gestures or anything.
So what was it about Sam that was different?
It seems like their connection was built on things like comfortable conversations, shared growth, and this willingness to embrace each other's imperfections.
That sounds like a really solid foundation.
Right. And it makes me think that maybe compromise is the key here. Like it's the bridge between fantasy and reality.
Absolutely. Compromise isn't about settling or giving up what you want. It's about valuing the relationship enough to find solutions that work for both people.
And sometimes those solutions can be even better than what you initially imagined, right?
Exactly. It's like you're choosing to create something unique together instead of trying to force two separate pieces to fit.
I love that analogy. And Alex actually said something similar about Sam. They weren't perfect, but neither was I. Maybe love wasn't about finding perfection, but learning to hold space for imperfection.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
What do you think Alex means by holding space for imperfection?
I think it's about acceptance. Accepting your partner's flaws and your own, and recognizing that you're both works in progress.
That makes sense. Like creating a space where those imperfections are seen as part of who you are, not something to be hidden or ashamed of.
Exactly. And I feel like that's where real intimacy and connection can actually flourish.
Absolutely.
Wow, this deep dive is already giving us so much to think about. We've seen how fantasy can be both inspiring and misleading, how those societal beauty standards can really distract us from genuine connection, and how important it is to find someone who wants to grow alongside us. But there's still so much more to unpack, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. We've only just scratched the surface.
Well, then let's keep digging because this reflection doesn't stop there. It goes on to talk about how Alex and Sam actually face some pretty significant challenges together.
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting. I can't wait to dive into that.
Me too. Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and explore what happened next.
That's good.
All right, so we're back and ready to dive into the next part of Alex's journey with Sam.
Yeah, this is where things start to get real. It's one thing to talk about accepting imperfection, but it's a whole other thing to actually live it out in a relationship.
Totally.
Yeah.
Especially when those imperfections start to cause conflict or tension.
Right. Like, how do you deal with those moments when your partner's flaws are driving you crazy?
Well, it seems like one of the keys is overcoming that fear of failure.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. I think a lot of us are taught to see rejection or heartbreak as some kind of personal failing.
It's like we're supposed to avoid it at all costs.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But this reflection suggests that those experiences, even though they're painful, can actually be opportunities for growth.
So instead of seeing a breakup or even just a disagreement as a sign that you're not compatible, you can look at it as a chance to learn more about yourself and what you need.
Yeah, it's like shifting your perspective from this didn't work out to what can I learn from this?
I love that. It takes the pressure off finding that so-called perfect match.
Right. It's not about finding someone who's already perfect. It's about finding someone who's willing to grow alongside you.
And that growth isn't just limited to your romantic relationships either.
You're right. The skills you learn in one area of your life can totally be applied to others.
Like communication, for example.
Exactly. Or empathy, or setting boundaries.
Which brings us to another important point this reflection makes about finding that balance between compromise and asserting your own needs.
That's always a tricky one, isn't it?
It's like that whole meet me in the middle thing, but
But
sometimes even finding that middle ground can feel impossible.
it takes a lot of open communication.
Mhm.
Being able to express your needs clearly, but also being willing to listen to your partner's perspective.
And sometimes that means having difficult conversations.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This reflection doesn't sugarcoat things. It acknowledges that Alex and Sam had disagreements and moments of doubt, just like any couple.
But instead of seeing those moments as signs that their relationship was failing, they viewed them as opportunities to deepen their connection.
That's a really mature way to approach conflict.
It's like choosing to face those challenges head on instead of trying to avoid them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that takes a lot of emotional intelligence.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's about being able to recognize and manage your own emotions, but also being able to empathize with your partner's feelings.
It's like creating that space where both people feel heard and understood even when they disagree.
Right. And that brings us to another important theme in this reflection, the idea that love is not a destination, but a journey.
I love that because it challenges that whole fairy tale notion of happily ever after.
Yeah, real relationships are constantly evolving. They're messy and unpredictable.
And it's in those moments of challenge that we have the opportunity to really grow together.
This reminds me of that anecdote about Alex and Sam planning a trip.
Oh, yeah. What was it again?
Well, Alex had always dreamed of traveling the world, but Sam suggested they start with a smaller trip closer to home.
And Alex was initially disappointed, right?
Yeah, they felt like they were compromising on their dream. But as they started planning the trip together, Alex realized that the joy wasn't really about the destination. It was about the shared experience.
That's so true. Sometimes we get so caught up in the big picture that we forget to appreciate the smaller moments.
Exactly. And this reflection seems to suggest that true love is often found in those everyday moments. The quiet evenings together, the inside jokes, the shared struggles and triumphs.
It's about finding joy in the ordinary rather than waiting for those big romantic gestures.
Right, because real life and real love is messy and imperfect.
And it's in those imperfections that we often find the most beauty and authenticity.
It's like choosing to see the cracks in the pavement as part of the landscape.
I love that analogy. It's like those imperfections add character and depth.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think this reflection is saying that true love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who walks beside you.
Accepting your imperfections and supporting your growth.
Exactly. It's about embracing the journey together with all its ups and downs.
Knowing that the destination is constantly evolving.
And that even when you stumble, you can always choose to pick each other up and keep moving forward.
This deep dive has been incredible. We've explored so much already, from the complexities of fantasy and reality to the importance of compromised communication and embracing imperfection. But before we wrap things up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on what we can take away from all this.
Yeah, what are some key insights that our listeners can apply to their own lives?
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is that we have to shift our thinking.
Yeah.
Instead of looking for the perfect partner, it's about finding someone who's willing to grow with you.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Because it's not like you find the right person and then everything's perfect.
Right. It's more like finding someone who wants to go on that journey with you and all the messiness that comes with it.
And that means accepting yourself and your partner for who you are, flaws and all.
Not trying to fit into some perfect mold that doesn't even exist,
Right. And that brings us back to communication. Like Alex and Sam were really intentional about creating that space where they could talk openly and honestly.
even when it was hard.
Exactly. Because those tough conversations are often the ones that help you grow the most.
It's about expressing your needs clearly, but also really listening to your partner's perspective.
So that both of you feel heard and understood.
And that goes back to that idea of holding space, you
Mm.
know? It's not just about tolerating someone's flaws,
It's about actively creating an environment where they feel safe to be themselves.
which requires a lot of trust and emotional intelligence.
Being able to recognize and manage your own emotions,
Yeah.
but also being able to empathize with your partner.
That's how you navigate those ups and downs that every relationship goes through.
This whole deep dive has been so insightful. I think the main takeaway is that real love isn't about finding someone who completes you,
It's about finding someone who walks beside you.
accepting your imperfections and supporting your growth.
And that's such a powerful way to think about relationships. It takes all the pressure off.
So instead of searching for that fairy tale,
Yeah.
be open to finding a love that's real imperfect and ultimately much more beautiful because of it.
I love that. Well, it's been amazing exploring all this with you. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought as you navigate your own relationships.
Thanks for listening, everyone.